What's up guys, Mitch from the DIYRecordingStudio.com, and in our previous video we were looking at the VCA compressor that they've just released for free for the whole month of March, and you should definitely go get it. And in our last video I left you guys saying that I thought there was some differences between the hardware and the software. Now, I don't have a DBX 160 VU to directly compare to this plugin, but I do have a bunch of awesome DBX 160Xs, the 166 stereo compressor, and these DBX 163s. And they're all part of the DBX family. They all deliver that same punchiness in their own way. They all work slightly different from one another. Anyway, here's my session. I've got each of these external effects that work like plugins. Ignore what they're actually called. I've got to relabel them. But yes, they are going to each of those units. The names might be a bit wrong here. I've got to fix that. Anyway, let's have a listen to the drums. So here is our VCA compressor. So the drum bus is going to the 166s. And what I'm hearing is the DBX has this like punchiness to the lows and adds that thwack, and so does the plugin, but the plugin for some reason has this boominess to it. And then when the kick drum is hitting, the clickiness has this paperiness to it that I hear with the plugin, whereas on the hardware, it's just clicky and punchy in a more pleasant way. Have another listen. And the other thing I'm hearing is the snare is brought more forward in the plugin, and the mid-range is a little bit different on the snare in the plugin, and the cymbals are just a little bit harsher, but it's nothing too drastic. But yeah, I'm definitely hearing the differences that are there. Let's have a listen to the bass. For hardware, my 163s. This is the plugin. That's a very big difference for me. What I'm hearing differently here is the 163s give it some punch and bring out the articulation and the energy, but they're smoothing out the bass in this really nice way, whereas the VCA compressor is like doing some funny stuff in the mids, bringing up the mids a lot again, and bringing out more in a harsh way the tops, the clickiness of the bass. Have another listen. This is the hardware. Let's have a listen with the drums and bass and have a listen to the difference. So we're going to start out with software. And most obvious to me, what I'm hearing here is that with the plugin, the bass and the drums are still a bit separate, but also fighting each other in the low transient stuff. But then with the hardware, I'm hearing that everything glues together and then still is identifiably separate. The bass definitely sounds smoother and like it has better low frequency response. And everything just seems glued together a bit better than with the plugin. This is the plugin. Hardware. The bass really sits underneath the drums in this really nice way when that fill comes in. Have a listen. Whereas in the plugin, they're kind of fighting. It's almost like the bass gets in the way a little bit on that fill, whereas it supports the drums with the hardware. That's kind of some of the spots where I can hear differences with the bass. Now, the biggest difference I actually heard was in the guitars. The guitars sound incredibly different. They're running through my DBX 160Xs, and we'll have a listen to them in solo first so you can hear it. Let's start with the plugin. I'm hearing such a big difference here. The two main things I'm hearing is that the low end is really coming up with the plugin and getting a bit more muddy, whereas the hardware seems to keep everything nice and tight in the low frequencies. And then whilst both plugin and hardware add attack, the attack added by the plugin is once again in the highs just that little bit harsher and like papery sounding, whereas there's attack and like transient information added in the hardware, but it's not overly annoying and bitey in your ears. It just does like a real nice addition to it. Like listen when the doubles come in. The lows start to bloom. And then on the hardware, listen to the lows. Way more lows. And then listen to the highs when it's just the lead guitar. Especially there. On that kind of bit where it gets real like attacky and bitey. And then on the hardware, like it's there, but it's not as annoying to your ears. Brings out all that sort of stuff. And then if you put the hardware on, it's not as harsh in your ears. It's crazy. So once again, like this is something that I'm seeing the more I do these hardware shootouts, is that whilst the plugin in isolation generally sounds good, and it does a fine job, like it's not that it's unusable, generally the low frequencies are a little bit muddy, a little bit less tight. Sometimes there's some funny things happening in the mid-range, and then the high frequency information on the plugins is just that little bit more brittle, a little bit more harsh, or a little bit papery sounding. And the hardware just automatically cleans that stuff up. It tightens things up and it just sounds the way we kind of want it to already sound without having to then add another EQ or dynamic EQ or any of that kind of stuff. What I'll do now, let's jump back in one last time, solo the guitars, the bass and the drums. Knowing what we know now, we'll listen to the plugin and we'll compare it to the hardware. So once again, just in that comparison, I'm hearing that the kick drum is tighter on the hardware. The bass has a more fuller sound on the hardware. The guitars are less annoying and brittle on the hardware versus the plugin. Now, does that mean you can't use this plugin? Absolutely not. The plugin still does a great job. It still gives it that punch, but it definitely brings up the low frequencies a little more. It definitely just does that plug-in thing where the mids are a bit different, the highs are a little bit different, and you have to know then how to compensate that in the mix if you're using plugins. So remember, it's just the right tool for the job. Sometimes a plugin's still the right tool for the job. Anyway, let me know what you're hearing in the comment sections down below. I'm always interested to hear what everyone else is hearing. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Sign off down there, or if you have any questions about anything I've done today, you can contact me on my email, mitch@thediyrecordingstudio.com, or you can hit me up on Instagram. It's a much easier way to communicate with me than on YouTube. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. I'm Mitch from the DIYRecordingstudio.com. I'll catch you soon.
Well, I can be a drug, you the answer to my sins was a bit of the bottle you grabbing to swallow the little bit of pill that I cut up for you to come cuddle up to me. Gotta be up to round 3.